Online, I've been telling you, the left is calling it a coup. It's a coup. On television, they're calling it a constitutional crisis. Over to you, Kaitlin Collins.
We are 3 weeks into the second Trump presidency, 3 weeks, and tonight there are warnings that the U.S. is dangerously close to a constitutional crisis. Now, the first shoe on this dropped when a federal judge today said the White House is defying his order to unfreeze billions of dollars in federal aid, marking the first time that we've had a judge expressly accuse the Trump administration of ignoring a court ruling. And in a separate case today, federal employees here in Washington told a judge that the administration was defying another order by not reinstating workers who had been put on leave. Now, this all has prominent Democrats and many of the nation's top constitutional scholars declaring that the U.S. is on the brink of a reckoning. The Trump Justice Department says the president should have the authority to decide how to run the government and that these judges are overreaching. And some of the president's allies say the judges should not be judging any of the moves to shrink the federal government.
It's a constitutional crisis because some constitutional scholars, by the way, they're all progressives. Kaitlin Collins leaves that out. I wonder why, but the people who are screaming it's a constitutional crisis, they're all on the left. Edwin Chemerinsky is a well-known progressive constitutional law scholar. By the way, the judge who's decided that Trump is explicitly defying his order is a major Democratic donor. Weird how Kaitlin Collins didn't want to point out that before becoming a judge was a massive, massive Democratic donor. I wonder what's going on here. If it's a constitutional crisis, maybe it's the judges, not Trump doing it, but it's the hysteria that gets me. 3 weeks ago, the American Bar Association celebrated the passage of the 29th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Now, you may not know that the Constitution was amended 3 weeks ago, but Joe Biden, by tweet, I kid you not, by tweet, announced that the Equal Rights Amendment was actually binding constitutional law, and the 29th Amendment to the Constitution, and the American Bar Association actually celebrated amending the Constitution by tweet. And now the very same American Bar Association that 3 weeks ago thought the Constitution could be amended by tweet is worried about a constitutional crisis and presidential overreach. Here's what's going on. The President of the United States is gutting a federal bureaucracy that protects progressives when they're out of power and continues to fund them. He's cut off the funding and he's cut off the manpower to fund a progressive resistance. And so that is what a constitutional crisis and coup is. The president preserving democracy by ousting the people who would defy the president's will in the executive branch. Again, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1, very first sentence, the executive power is vested in a President of the United States, not in a bureaucracy. And Kaitlin Collins and CNN and the rest of the media are claiming constitutional crisis. Why? Because progressives aren't getting their money from Uncle Sam right now. What you have to understand is that when out of power, progressives build up a massive out-of-power base of operations, and much of it is funded by the federal government as a pass-through to non-governmental organizations, NGOs. They fund it not just through USAID, but through other entities. They fund these nonprofits on the outside of government that advise the government. They're good government groups. And the progressives build up a base of operations, and then they embed within the federal government. So that when a Democrat becomes president, he can, like Joe Biden, ignore the Supreme Court on student loans and go full steam ahead, and there's no constitutional crisis. But Donald Trump decides to fire some people who happen to be progressives, and it's a constitutional crisis because the media says so. Which is why no one believes the media anymore. And remember, the left has been attacking federal judges and the Supreme Court for the past 4 years. And now suddenly you're not allowed to question the integrity of the judiciary on the outside. Isn't that funny? CNN, and I'm picking on CNN in particular because it's the network that tries to claim it's above partisan politics. CNN has regularly run ProPublica attacks on the Supreme Court. And now suddenly the judiciary is sacrosanct, and we must believe when a federal judge says Donald Trump has done something wrong, that he actually has done something wrong. And we can't question the amount of money that judge gave to Democrats before becoming a Joe Biden appointed jurist. It's a constitutional crisis. I've seen this before, and so have you. I keep this clip on file to remind you of just how ridiculous the press coverage of Donald Trump can be. This is from just the first 2 years of the original Trump administration.
Breaking news.
A bombshell.
Today is a turning point. Today was historically bad for President Trump.
Today was a turning point.
A turning point.
We're at a turning point here.
The beginning of the end for the Trump presidency.
We have another bombshell.
Mike Pence might have to assume the office of the presidency.
Rumblings of the word impeachment.
Breaking news.
Another bombshell out of the White House.
I believe this is the beginning of the end.
I do too.
It's really the beginning of the end.
He may be feeling the walls closing in on him.
All the walls closing in on him.
The walls closing in on him.
Breaking news, a new bombshell.
One astrologer says this means the beginning of the end for President Donald Trump.
Trump will resign.
Trump is going to resign.
Is this the tipping point? I know we've said it over and over.
You think this is a tipping point?
And over and over.
This is a tipping point.
And over and over.
Breaking news, President Trump off the rails.
This is the beginning of the end today.
The beginning of the end.
Breaking news tonight, new bombshell.
This is the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end.
The walls are closing in.
The walls closing in.
The walls closing in.
Breaking overnight bombshell.
This is a very dramatic day, and I think it might be near a tipping point. Do you think this is a tipping point?
December 1st, 2017, you can mark it down. This is the day that everything changed.
The beginning of the end?
Beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end.
The beginning of the
We begin tonight with a bombshell.
Donald Trump is in a lot of trouble.
Trump is in trouble.
The president will resign.
Another hour, another bombshell.
This is a tipping point.
Trump's going down.
This president could be impeached.
Resignation. I don't think this president is going to serve out his term.
Mr. Trump will not serve out his term.
He will not serve out his term.
No way, no how.
Breaking news.
Absolute bombshell.
Donald Trump is not. He's done. And it's over.
It's over.
The walls closing in.
The walls closing in.
This is going to be the Achilles heel.
breaking news tonight. I expect Trump to depart.
This week will be the watershed week.
Trump is in big trouble.
Trump's in a lot of trouble.
It's a sign of a terrified old man who feels the
Walls
Closing in.
The walls
Are increasingly
Closing in on him.
tonight. The walls
are closing in.
today changed everything. This is the beginning
of the end.
Today, the biggest.
Tipping point for the Trump administration.
What a historic day. The bombshells.
He's underwater. He feels
The walls closing in.
Turning point.
we may be at a tipping point.
It's the beginning of
The end.
The beginning
Of the end.
Another bombshell.
bombshell. Bombshell.
Bombshell.
Bombshell.
bombshell.
bombshell. This is a bombshell. It is.
Y'all, that was from 2017 into 2018. I love that. It is one of my favorite things to play. And they're back to it. They're back to it. Literally, this is Kaitlin Collins from CNN last night.
We are 3 weeks into the second Trump presidency. We are 3 weeks into the second Trump presidency, 3 weeks. And tonight there are warnings that the U.S. is dangerously close to a constitutional crisis.
Oh my gosh, it is a constitutional crisis that we are on the verge of. A constitutional crisis. By the way, one of the people who claims the walls were closing in on Donald Trump and it was a bombshell was Norm Eisen, who is a left-wing partisan who has, with that idiot Jen Rubin, started The Contrarian, an outside publication to defy expectations and stand for democracy. And he's on MSNBC. Remember the Ask Lesko guy back in the 80s and 90s? In the overnight infomercials, he wore the jacket with the question marks, Ask Lesko! Listen to this Norm Eisen voice.
Here's what the other side looks like. We are not the only nation that has had an autocratic takeover. It happened in Poland. It happened in Brazil. It happened where I was ambassador, Czech Republic. All three of those countries got to the other side. They ousted autocratic regimes like Trump and Musk. You know, there's always an oligarch.
Right.
Whenever you've got a dictator, you've got an oligarch.
Right.
Seven things. And the law.
Good Lord. And so now he thinks he's got the secret of propping up democracy. Send some money, subscribe to The Contrarian, and they'll protect democracy. And he's claiming, oh, we're filing all these lawsuits. And guess what? By the way, they're filing lawsuits with Obama-appointed judges who are almost to a person the exact same judges who in 2017 tried to block Trump. And they slowed him down, but they couldn't stop him. Some of the things they're doing, like, for example, issuing an order that says the political appointees at the Treasury Department aren't allowed to oversee what the bureaucrats are doing. That's patently absurd, and Trump should ignore an order from a court that tells him that the political class cannot oversee the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats are under the political class. The elected people, Donald Trump is the executive power of the United States, not a bureaucrat. They absolutely should ignore these court orders. They absolutely should, from judges who are overplaying their hand. Listen, this isn't to say Trump can't do unconstitutional stuff. Birthright citizenship, I think, is probably unconstitutional. Some of the other things, I do think that Donald Trump is prohibited from not spending money when Congress appropriates it and says spend it. I think that's pretty well settled. But some of the things like freezing workers out of jobs and things, it's perfectly legal for the president, who is the head of the executive branch, to do that sort of stuff. But the left can't handle it. And this is the thing. This is it. They're calling it a constitutional crisis because things aren't going their way on the left. That's what you have to understand here. They're calling it a coup online and a constitutional crisis on television because Donald Trump is disrupting them. You have a massive network of progressives who operate to embed themselves within the bureaucracy, and they rotate in and out from non-governmental organizations to the bureaucracy and back. They guarantee pass-through funding through congressional appropriation and the giving of grants from USAID and other sources, and Donald Trump has come in and he's cut off their pipeline. He's ousted the employees who are the progressive grifters. He's cut off the funding to them, and that's why they're calling it a constitutional crisis. If Donald Trump had come in and not done this, everything he did would be disrupted. Look, people within government are already leaking publicly to the media where the ICE raids are going to be to try to round up violent gangs. Think about that. Progressives in the administration are finding out where the ICE raids to wrap up, deport violent gangs are going to happen, and they're leaking it to the press. And the press, the progressives in the press, are dutifully reporting it so that the gang members know to get out of the way. The progressives in government are putting murderous illegal alien gangs ahead of American citizens. And the press calls what Donald Trump is doing a constitutional crisis, not that. It's because the press and the left are in the same bubble. They are the same people. They do not like Donald Trump, and they resent like hell that he might be cutting their funding. For God's sakes, he's canceled all their subscriptions. You know, I don't think it's been talked about enough that much of the mainstream media across the political spectrum, by the way, has defended the Politico and said that massive pile of subscriptions wasn't a subsidy. Of course it was a subsidy. Of course it was. You had one department, the VA, giving almost $150,000 to Politico in subscriptions, and that's one of many departments also giving multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in subscriptions. And it all happened after COVID. Surprise! Massive subsidies that are now going away. Of course, the press can't be fair. Donald Trump has cut their gravy train, and he's cut all the people in the funding who prop up the left. They can't handle it, and so they've decided to go full-on hysterics. But again, it's worth pointing out, 3 weeks ago, none of these people were concerned about Joe Biden thinking he could tweet an amendment to the Constitution. None of these people were upset about a 4-year cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. None of these people were upset about Joe Biden giving blanket preemptive pardons to his family. None of these people were upset about Joe Biden pardoning his own son. None of these people were upset about any of the things Joe Biden did, including defying the Supreme Court on student loans. Only now is it a political crisis or a constitutional crisis because the press and the left are on the losing side.